In the middle centuries of the second millennium BCE, northern Mesopotamia was a jigsaw of river plains, foothills, and small city-states. The Assyrian city of Ashur, not yet a prominent power, crouched beside its river. Nudzi, Arapa, and Hurrian lay scattered like pebbles. The real great powers of the time, Egypt to the southwest and the Hittite kingdom to the northwest, were too distant or too busy to impose their will. The space between them was wide enough for a new kingdom to rise. Into this vacuum came a people whom their Assyrian neighbours called the Hanigal-Bat, whose own elites wrote their names in a Hurrian tongue, and whose gods bore Indo-Aryan epithets. Egyptian texts would call them Mitanni, but when their story begins, they are not yet a kingdom, only a loose constellation of noble houses, horse-breeding clans, and Hurrian-speaking villages woven between the rivers. It would take 2 generations and one ambitious line of kings to forge them into a power that could stare down both the pharaohs of Egypt and the chariot lords of Hatti alike. Long before any Mitanni king carved his name into the tablets of vassals, the region began to change for a quieter reason: the arrival of horses. Not the plodding draft animals that Mesopotamia was used to, but sleek, fast chariot horses, trained with methods that would later be set down in the famous Kikuli text, a charioteering manual written with Indo-Aryan technical words. Asusani, in this case meaning master horse trainer. And the counted command Aika, Terra, Panza, still recognizable as 135. These Indo-Aryan elites, small in number but influential, wed themselves into Hurrian noble houses. Through them came a new aristocratic culture, kings who rode, raced, and fought from 2-horse chariots. Nobles whose prestige came from the stables and warcraft, not the farms or temples. By 1500 BCE, these riders had woven themselves into the local Hurrian society so tightly that a distinct state began to emerge. This land between rivers could be their very own pasture, their very own kingdom. The earliest Mitanni rulers left no self-complimentary inscriptions, only the echoes left by their enemies. After the mythical founder, from where the kingdom gets its name, Assyrian tablets speak of Kirta, and his sons Shutana and Baratana. These shadow kings appear like silhouettes behind a curtain. They demand labour, collect horses, reorganize vassalage in the Jazeera, but leave no monuments. Their work is instead visible in what follows. By the time Pachatatar's son, Shaushtatar, was grown, Mitanni was no longer a scattering of towns. It was a kingdom with ambition, and a thriving capital. The Mitanni royal city, Washukani, lay somewhere on the Kabur River, a place scholars still have yet to locate, but its influence is unmistakable. Here, the Mitanni king kept his court, consisting of Hurrian scribes writing Akkadian diplomatic letters, horsemasters drilling charioteers in fields outside the walls, and envoys from Syria and the Levant waiting with sealed treaty tablets in hand. From Washukani, the Mitanni kings began to expand diplomatically, casting a net of alliances and oaths, sealed with gifts of horses or royal daughters. The warlike Mitanni ironically expanded best through peace. Shaushtatar stepped into a landscape familiar to the later Hittites and Egyptians, a world where the only way to survive was to be too useful to crush or too dangerous to challenge. He made Mitanni both useful and dangerous. Assyria, the restless neighbour to the east, was stirring again after a period of weakness, so Shaushtatar moved quickly. In a campaign remembered bitterly in later Assyrian chronicles, he marched on Ashur, plundered its palace, and carried off the city's silver door panels to Washukani. From then on, Assyria might have even paid annual tribute. Westward, Shaushtatar tightened Mitanni's grip on the cities of northern Syria, Alalak, Aleppo, and Carchemish, binding them to Mitanni as vassals. These cities guarded the trade routes that flowed from Anatolia into Mesopotamia, and control of them meant immense wealth. Farther south, Egypt was awakening to foreign affairs again under their new kingdom. For a time, Egypt and Mitanni glared at each other across the Levant, like 2 lions measuring strength. By the end of Shaushtatar's reign, the kingdom stretched from the foothills of the Zagros to the Orontes River, an empire not as centralized as Egypt, but swift, aristocratic, and bound by the prestige of its ruling house. After Shoshtata's death, his son Artatama I inherited not only a kingdom, but a delicate balance of power. Egypt under Thutmose III had grown aggressive, and the Levant was no longer a quiet borderland. Mitanni's kings were skilled horsemen, but not builders of massive armies suited for open desert battle. So, Artatama chose diplomacy. This alliance was later reinforced when Shutana II's daughter, Gilukhepa, and then Tushratta's daughter, Tadukhepa, married Amenhotep III. Their arrival brought peace to the Levant for a generation. If Shaushtata made Mitanni feared, King Tushratta made it famous. He came to the throne as a youth, guided by regents and threatened by rival claimants. Yet once secure, he revived the Mitanni's old strategy of diplomacy backed by chariot strength. Egypt, now under Amenhotep III, was at the height of its power. As just mentioned, Tushratta sent his sister Gilukhepa to Egypt, and later his daughter, to strengthen ties. In his letters, preserved in the Amarna archive, Tushratta writes with the voice of a man both proud and anxious, "I send you the finest horses of my land, fit for your chariot. May our brotherhood be forever." He repeatedly requests gifts of gold statues, golden furniture and vessels, and reminds the pharaoh that Mitanni has been faithful. His tone wavers between confident and pleading, and he knows Egypt is drifting toward other alliances. Behind the scenes, Mitanni was fracturing. Rival nobles challenged Tushratta's authority. The distant vassal states in Syria loosened their loyalties. And to the north, a new danger stirred. The Hittite king, the brilliant, the ruthless Shuppiluliuma. Shuppiluliuma marched into Syria, seizing Mitanni-held cities one by one. Carchemish defected, Aleppo fell. The princes of Amurru swore loyalty to the Hittite king. Mitanni's Syrian net unravelled. In the wake of defeat, Mitanni nobles staged a palace coup. Tushratta fled, or was murdered, while rival claimants usurped the throne. The empire was all but dead, as the Hittites now controlled the rich Syrian trade routes, and the Mitanni were relegated to a rump state under their influence. Tushratta's son, Shatiwaza, who had rightful claim to the kingship, then sought Hittite aid to reclaim his throne. Shuppiluliuma agreed, with his own strategic goals in mind. Together they marched east, dethroned the usurper, and set Shatiwaza upon the weakened throne, but the price was high. Shatiwaza signed a treaty turning Mitanni into a Hittite vassal. Washukani remained the capital in name, but the real centre of power was now the Hittite double kingdom of Hatti and Carchemish. While Mitanni wrestled with internal crises, Assyria had been reborn. Under Ashurbanipal, Assyria broke free of Mitanni control. Then, under Adad-nirari, it turned its attention westward. Shatiwaza's successors, weak, impoverished, and squeezed between two powers, could not resist. The remnants of Mitanni were absorbed into the expanding Assyrian state. The land that had been the proud domain of the horse lords became simply Hanigalbat, an Assyrian province administered by governors. Its people recruited into the Assyrian army to serve as horse trainers and charioteers. Mitanni then faded, absorbed piece by piece, until its kings became names on dusty treaty tablets, and its capital a puzzle for archaeologists. Though the Mitanni kingdom lasted only 2 centuries, its influence endured. It transmitted Indo-Aryan horse training techniques into the Near East, and shaped the diplomacy of the Late Bronze Age through its marriages with Egypt. Its Hurrian language, carried by its scribes, continued to be used in Hittite courts long after Mitanni vanished, and its former lands became the battleground on which Assyria grew into an empire. The Mitanni kings left behind no monumental temples or pyramid tombs. Their legacy lies instead in the thunder of hooves across the northern plains.